So, all right, so hi, good evening again. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the wonderful quality of mind that Suzuki Roshi popularized with the title Beginner's Mind, and then try to relate that to some of our common experiences in daily life and meditation. And hopefully there will be plenty of time for discussion. And I apologize, I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold, so if I cough a little bit or clear my throat, it's just part of the game, sorry. So I want to start with the quotation from Suzuki Roshi. He was not born in the United States, he was born in Japan, and his teacher sent him to the United States to establish what became the San Francisco Zen Center and the Green Ghost Center. And it was the first non-Asian practice center that was established in the United States. And that was the purpose of his being sent here. There were lots of ethnic Buddhist churches at the time, but there hadn't been any center that was established that was specifically focusing on Westerners and the Western mind. And so the term beginners of the mind is not a term that the historical Buddha used, but it relates to many of his teachings. So here's what Suzuki Roshi had to say. He said, people say that practice is difficult, but that's a misunderstanding as to why it's difficult. It's difficult because it's hard to keep our mind pure and our practice pure in a fundamental sense. The goal of practice is always to keep our beginner's mind. This means an empty mind, a ready mind. If your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything. It is open to everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert's mind, there are few possibilities. So that's kind of the starting place, and I'd like to start with an experience I had recently here in Sacramento. You may be familiar with a art center in New York called MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. It's one of my favorite things. And they've just opened in Sacramento. It's called MoSAC, M-O-S-A-C, and they use the same letters and everything, different colors. And MoSAC means Museum of Science and Curiosity. And it's really a nice little endeavor. They have it right on the river. I would say that it is primarily for kids and adolescents, but there's a whole series of features in it that are for adults. But when you walk in, you get a badge, you turn to the right, and then you go to a big room, and it's fantastic. It's a hub of activity going on with separate little rooms that are divided up with different activities. So there's a whole series of small little tables where kids can get down and explore with various types of things that fit together. And then there's another room that has various types of pictures of birds and insects, and you can sit down and draw and paint them, or it's got like a live beehive that's in this glass container, and the bees actually go out into the community and then come back in through this tube, so you can watch all of that. And then there's a room for I would say adolescents, and there's huge maps on each one of the walls. And then there's big control boards with, maybe 50, 60 different buttons. And if you press one of the buttons, an area will light up on the map. And then it will give you all this information historically about what's happened at that location or what's happening right now in that location. And so the whole place is devoted to learning about the city, exploring, environmentalism. It's really a great place. So I went out there recently, and I was just kind of watching what was going on. I'd never been there before, and two things really jumped out at me. The first one, well, it's one thing divided into two parts, I guess. And it was the way people were behaving. And when I first went into this area where there's these divided rooms, all the kids were just like so alive. They were curious, they were interested, they were engaged, they were exploring. It was clear that they were just like in the moment and discovering things. And then most of the adults were standing there watching, pretty much detached, and waiting. And that's the part that I found really interesting. It's like, well, what were they waiting for? Like just for it to be over so they could go, or what was it? But the fact that you had the kids and the adolescents that were just like so present and involved, and then the adults were pulled back and watching and basically detached. They weren't connected with the events that were taking place. Was so striking. And for me, it's actually kind of a metaphor of how of meditation, of how the mind engages meditation, either being really curious, involved, and engaged, or actually standing back and watching, not being in the experience, which leads to a feeling of detachment and really non-experience. But it would be easy to think that why I use this illustration would be, oh, well, he's saying that the kids had beginner's mind and the adults didn't. But not that easy, okay? Because there was a third group, and the third group were adults who were acting just like the kids. And they weren't being silly, but they were really awake and alert. And once you get past the room where you're down on the floor with these little tables, the place is designed for adults and kids to do things together. So there were adults that were sitting at the table, and the kids were drawing little worms and insects and everything, and so were the adults. And they were exploring the beehives. And then with the adolescents in this larger room were the maps. I mean, it's a really fascinating thing. And so they were hitting the buttons, and they were engaging with their kids and with the exhibit itself. So for me, how that relates to what this topic is about is that beginner's mind, and really at the very core of practice, when Suzuki Roshi's talking about keeping the practice pure, it has to do with the quality of mind that we bring to the activity that we're involved in. And in this illustration, there was one group of people who were bringing interest and curiosity, and really that turning into adventure and discovery. And another group of people really bringing a mind that was not curious, or sadly, really not interested. They were just there to be a caretaker and not be involved. So we're really talking about two qualities of mind here, and another term for beginner's mind that you may be familiar with is I don't know mind. It's the mind that is not making assumptions. It's not projecting anything onto what the experience is. It relates to the sutra, that the famous sutra about how consciousness is established by the historical Buddha, and the instruction is when you see, just see. When you hear, just hear. So it's the voice of a bird and hearing, and nothing in between. And it's the voice of a bird and hearing, and nothing being added onto it. No judgment, no reactivity. Allowing things to be as they are and seeing them clearly. And there's a teaching story which you probably heard, but I'll repeat my version of it. It's about two two young monks walking down this opposite sides of the river, and they have to cross a bridge, and they meet, and it's like, hey, what monastery are you from? And they're each from different monasteries, and they start talking about their teachers. And the one says, well, what's really amazing about my teacher? And the other one says, well, no, what's amazing about it? He says, well, and then he starts to report all these amazing things that he can do. And, in the suttas, there's these qualities of mind that fully awakened beings can supposedly have. They can read minds, they can teleport themselves, they can do all these things. So one young monk is very enamored with all of these shiny, exciting things, and is reporting it to the other monk. and then with a lot of ego and pride, the young monk says to the other monk, well, what's amazing about your teacher? And he says, well, my teacher's really amazing. He says, when my teacher eats, he eats. And when he hears, he hears. And when when he sees, he sees. So that sounds simple, but just think about the meditation you just had, where the mind is constantly coming in and adding things to experience, classifying them, making a preference of some kind, coloring the experience. So an illustration is, we'll just do a little experiment here. I'm going to ask you just to close your eyes for just a minute, and just take a breath or two. And just allow the body and mind to relax on the out breath. And then when you open your eyes up, look at the sleeve of your shirt or your blouse or your sweater, and see if you can notice anything about that you have not seen before. Or if you've seen this before, something new that you haven't seen before. In other words, bringing a mind to it that's a fresh mind, and looks at that and sees what's actually there. Okay. Just allow that quality of mind to move from the sleeve of your blouse or your sweater or your shirt to the palm of your hand. And then notice if there's anything about the palm of your hand this evening, or your fingers, that you haven't seen before, or something new. And then just allow the sight to move down to your pants or your slacks. Maybe some of you have your pajamas on. And look at those, and see if you can do that with a fresh mind. Is there something there, even if you've seen it before, that's new, or that you haven't seen that before? And then allow your sight to move down to the hardwood floor or the rug, and the same thing. Just allowing your eyes to soften and really look at the rug or the wood, and if there's something there that you haven't seen before, something that's new. Okay, bring the attention back up here. So my guess is, and we can have a discussion about this towards the end of the talk. I'm going to make this a little bit shorter so we have time to have an exchange. But my guess is that almost everybody on almost all of those, or most of those, is able to see something that they haven't seen before, or see something new about it, because The last time you looked, you were a different person. The quality of mind, the level of energy, all of these different things about any given moment of our life is different than it was before, particularly with your hands. The quality of your skin changes. And I think it's just fascinating how you can look at something that we're with all of the time and actually see something new or something that you haven't seen before. If, and this is the big if, and this is what all of this is about, if we bring that quality of mind to the experience. If we don't bring that quality of mind to the experience, we get another quality of mind, and that's the polar opposite. And that is the mind that already knows. And this is the mind that actually dominates our daily life and probably most of our sittings. It's the mind that is seeing through a set of beliefs, fixed views, assumptions, prior experiences. And so it's not seeing fresh, it's not seeing new, and it's not looking for the opportunity to see something new or something that it hasn't seen before. That's not the objective. The objective is primarily for the mind to categorize experiences into categories that relate to prior experiences. So it knows what's going on, so it feels comfortable. And that's a very early and immediate reaction of the mind to encountering new experience. But the problem with it is that if we allow that to dominate, that it takes over and it thwarts the ability of the mind to actually be interested, engaged, and explore. So it's like, okay, I know what this is. And the actual interest in exploring it is either diminished or doesn't exist any longer. And it's just enough to confirm that the mind knows what is happening, and then to proceed through the experience. So there's a number of simple illustrations that I wrote down just to try to make this tangible. So here's ones that sound familiar to me. You get an email, you get a text, or you're talking with somebody. This is somebody that you know well. It could be a friend, a partner, what have you. And the mind says, basically, well, I already know what they're saying, what they mean, what they're feeling, what they're about to say. And this is particularly jumps out at me about texts and emails, about all of the assumptions that people make. You look at an email and people assume that you mean something that you didn't mean, or that they project onto it a quality of mind that another person wouldn't. And so rather than actually just seeing, this is a message, a whole set of assumptions or fixed views comes into place to interpret them. And rather than asking if something was intended or meant by the language of the email, a response goes back, the person's offended or is addressing a whole issue that wasn't even raised by the email. Just such a fascinating thing. One of the illustrations that I remember a lot from my earlier life is my daughter would come to me and we'd have this discussion, and she'd get this look on her face. And this is when I'm giving her my advice, okay? And she'd get this look on her face, and the way my mind interpreted this look was, Dad, you're so full of shit. I'm just not buying this at all, And embarrassingly, it was only years later that I think I really understood that what that look meant was not that at all, but that it was a look of confusion and vulnerability. And, just thinking about that, like all of the potential lost opportunities of communicating with the child when they needed help, and that the failure for that to happen was something that your mind was adding on to the experience, rather than clarifying it. So that would be an illustration. Another one is that you eat a meal and barely taste it, or later in the day can't even remember what it was. It's just amazing how often I think this happens for people. So you're not even really present for the experience. Another one would be is that, and I think this has a lot to do with the quality of our meditations, is that the mind falls into a groove and it says to itself, well, I already know what's going to happen in meditation. There's only so much that can happen, and I know what it is. So you sit down for meditation, and the mind doesn't set the intention at the beginning of the meditation to be awake and alert and curious and interested. It just sits down, goes into some kind of automatic, rote, repetitive behavior that it calls meditation. And then we're confused about why nothing's really happening for us in our meditations. I think this happens also a lot with when we listen to a particular topic. The mind says, well, I already know what that topic or that teaching is. And the minute that quality of mind comes in, it starts listening selectively, in the same way that it's reading the email or listening to your spouse or your partner selectively, so that you're not really doing what's in that original sutta of the historical Buddha, just listening, just seeing, just tasting, feeling, hearing, smelling. You've actually dampened the ability for those things to happen, because the mind at some level believes that it already knows. And this is the reason that I think Suzuki Hiroshi's comparison to the expert, says in the expert's mind there's few possibilities, is actually a little deceptive, because in our culture, a culture that just worships education and knowledge and skill, the expert implies someone who's actually gone through some kind of quality training and actually possesses some expertise that you can measure against an objective standard. But that's not what Suzuki Roshi is referring to when he talks about the expert's mind. He's talking about the mind that already knows what the experience or the answer is, and as a result, experiences it selectively, like the parents at SACMO that are just observing and standing back detached. They're not involved. So why is this important? Well, I think it's important because of the difference between these two qualities of mind. The mind that says, I don't know. So it's starting from a place of interest and curiosity and exploration. Its motivation is the motivation of contemplative practice. It's to actually understand what we're experiencing directly, which leads to insight and growth. And the mind that says, I already know, shuts off that possibility, or makes it very hard for that to happen, because the incentive, the motivation, the intention is not to be curious, is not to be interested, is not to be engaged. The motivation is just to maintain the status quo, to maintain stability and comfort. And so one quality of mind enriches our life. And if we're engaged in contemplative practice, really supports and makes our contemplative practice possible. And the other quality of mind actually diminishes our life. and it diminishes our contemplative practice. So, I mean, what to do about it? I think without going into like a bunch of different practices, the most important consideration is to realize that if in fact what this is about is the quality of mind that we bring to our experience, that is a choice. That's a question of intention. And we have to make that choice. I mean, if we actually make that choice, then the mind goes on a search, like all of these different contemplative practices that we have. Well, how do we implement them? I mean, how do we bring curiosity and interest to an experience? How do we make mindfulness more tangible? But if we haven't made the choice, then our mind tends to default to automatic rote behavior. And so we're not looking to explore. We're not looking to investigate. And so we never get to these other qualities. So I think that's where I'm going to stop at this point, and then open it up for discussions, comments, objections, arguments, whatever seems appropriate.
Yes, I'll go.
Robert.
Yeah. So thank you so much for tonight. You've used the word curiosity and exploration. And to me, it translates to like monkey brain. And, you know, I also hear about emptiness or clearing the mind. And so the two seem contradictory to me, or at least leaves me confused, because when I meditate, I'm trying to quiet my mind. And from the last time you taught for Mountain Stream, it was super helpful. Like basically, I found myself being in the position of getting really super relaxed and like falling asleep kind of thing. So thank you. I've been improving on that. So thank you for that. So yeah, if you could address that,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so let's work. So I think you used the term monkey mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you define monkey mind so I can address that?
Just it's almost like a sparkler with all these different thoughts going, and then just trying to like, you know, calm that down and
Okay.
not shooting in all these different directions, and then trying to rein it back in.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So it in terms of like meditation process,
Yeah.
and this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I think it's helpful, is that you can take just about all of the different meditative techniques that are available and put them in one or two baskets. And one basket are practices that stabilize the mind, so that normally, like even right now, you know, we're looking, right? We're listening, we're thinking, and so you take your attention and put it on a single object. And rather than all those things going on, the energy in the body and the mind start to come together. They start to coalesce, collect. They start to stabilize and become calm. And that's where the feeling of calmness, stability, quote, centeredness, all these different things that attract so many people initially to meditation. That's why it happens, is that we're primarily taking our attention, putting it on a single object and holding it there. But that is just, at least in Buddhist practice, most Buddhist practice, is just the preliminary stage. It's getting the mind stable and balanced, and then opening up the awareness to the other experiences that are taking place in the body and the mind, and being curious and interested in what those experiences are. so that you have a thought and that triggers a response in the body, or you have a sensation in the body and it leads to an emotional response or a thought in the mind. So you're absolutely right about initially setting up a meditation and then maintaining it over and over again, is having this stability by using some kind of an anchor. And then, your mind will get kind of crazy and go into monkey mind and do all of this stuff, right? And then we bring it back to stability by going back to the anchor, whether that's our breath or our body, whatever we use, and then opening back up. And then if the mind kind of gets chaotic again, we restabilize. So it's like a dance. Okay. So the methodology is to rein in the monkey mind to the point where we can begin using interest and investigation. But if we don't have that second stage of investigation, we never get to insight, spontaneous insight through direct experience. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, if you could then just say, what is the investigation part then? Like, what's your definition of the investigation?
Okay. So what I always go back to is, the historical Buddha gave this talk that's referred to as the four foundations of mindfulness, or the four establishments of mindfulness. And he talks about four different broad categories of experiences that we can have. So there's experiences in our body, this amazing diverse experiences in our body. The second, which doesn't get much play, I think, in the West because it's so subtle, but I think it's really important, or he wouldn't have made it the second and whole category, is the tone, the feeling tone of every single experience we have, of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then the third are the things that happen in our mind. And then the fourth area are experiential insights. So there's things like, it's called dependent origination, which is the systematic exploration of how we become reactive and how we make a sense of separate self. So generally speaking, those four categories are the field of investigation. And in any practice, we're investigating different things at different times based on our stage of growth in practice, our stage of understanding, and personal development. So that kind of leads to, you were talking about emptiness. And emptiness is is a big topic. That's we could spend a couple of months of Monday nights just on emptiness. But I've always found emptiness, and to make this really simple, oversimplified, but I think it's helpful. I've always found emptiness an interesting explanation because it relates to emptiness is the term that is primarily used to describe anatta, or no self, in Mahayana Buddhism. And in Theravadan Buddhism, which is what I'm teaching out of, is we primarily use anatta, or no self. And so what emptiness means is that you have these experiences, and we actually have them, not just in meditation, but in daily life, and go right by them. We don't we haven't trained ourselves to see them, but we have these experiences in meditation and daily life where the management and control and direction of a sense of separate self is not there. There's just like awareness holding experience. And that sounds pretty simple, but when you have it, it's quite an experience to actually recognize what it is. And it is one of the defining big experiences in Buddhist practice. Eventually for practitioners, we all want to get to a place where we will, through development of our practice, and then through understanding what it is that we're trying to experience, and there's methods to do that, to begin experiencing that. Because if you actually experience that, not as an idea or philosophy, but actually have that experience of just awareness holding experience with compassion and kindness, and everything unfolding safely without the management and control of the self, it begins to completely change how we understand what it means to be human and be a human on this planet. It's thrilling, and it opens up all kinds of possibilities of living in a different way, which is what I understand Buddhist practice to be. So, okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
That may have been a showstopper. I don't know.
I'll watch the recording
Okay.
a couple times. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? We've got a few more minutes here. If there's some more comments or questions. Connie.
Yes, I was very interested in the place you described, and if I wanted to look it up, do I go to SACMA? How do I look up that place?
Yeah, let me it's MOSAC, MOSAC, and it's the Museum of Science and Curiosity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty new. When I went over there, they were still, kind of getting their act together, but it's really fun. And interestingly, it's built by SMUD, so it's all about energy and in the environment, the water. So
Thank you.
Hi, Dennis.
yes.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I don't think we've met, but I enjoy listening to your Dharma talks.
Thank you.
Listen to a few, but I'm going to go to that place of no self, and being in that field of pure awareness where everything is happening.
Okay.
And so kind of seeing that as our essential nature is that pure awareness, and identifying as that rather than all of the machinations of the mind or the sensations in the body, and whatever all the other identities that we can attach to. What would you say would be a helpful practice not to identify? I think just sitting in the awareness, but do you have any clues? It's so easy to get identified with all the other stuff.
Okay, so I'm clear. The question is
how not to identify as a sense of separate self when you're kind of sitting in the no self place, and then whatever is happening in your day-to-day life, there'll be a thought or sensation or identification, but there's got to be some practices not to get identified.
Okay, so this is the central problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I like. This is the question I like to pose that really frames this. I'd like you to think of the last time when you were suffering, when you weren't there.
The last time I was suffering when you
weren't there.
When I'm not here, I don't suffer.
Well, precisely. Yeah, and the first noble truth of the Four Noble Truths is that suffering exists, right? And the second noble truth is that the origin of suffering is craving. So if the only time we're suffering is when we're there to experience it as a self, why didn't the historical Buddha define personalization, selfing, the sense of separate self as the origin of suffering? And the reason is that craving leads to attachment or clinging, and clinging leads to a separate sense of self. So unless we understand that most fundamental causation, thing that's so helpful for me when I first encountered Buddhism, that it is based on a psychology of causation. It is not based on a psychology, a biographical narrative. It is not about my story, about what happened to me. It is about the moment that we're in right now. So if I am in desire or aversion, and I don't see that and get a hold of it, that leads to the mind contracting and beginning to attach to whatever that is. And if that continues, it becomes a sense of self. That's what causes suffering. So, when we say, well, what is the answer to not identify? The rational mind wants to go to, well, how do I not personalize, identify? And the Buddhist answer is you've got to go back to the origin. And the origin is craving, and then attachment, and then self. So the way that we undermine personalization, identification, a separate sense of I, me, mine, is first of all in meditation. And this goes back to Robert's question, like, well, what are we investigating? Well, we're investigating it, is what I just said true? It's the most fundamental teaching of suffering of the historical Buddha. Well, is it true? When I'm sitting here and I begin not to like the way my body's feeling right now, if I just let go of that, does it disappear? Or if I resist it, does it get stronger? And then I don't like it. It's not just a sensation in my body. It's become personal. So we all have to find this out for ourselves, but that's the starting point. Is in meditation, we can see this of what Suzuki Roshi was saying at its most fundamental level. So in my own case, I'm just a very, very strong believer that understanding the causation of suffering is the key to everything. And then there's, almost in a way, endless different methods to work with causation. But if we don't get at the deepest level that is the origin of both suffering and the self, then we can do a lot of different practices and not feel satisfied. We're not having insights because the mind isn't holding it to see it in a particular way. I'm going to be giving on this exact topic. I just did a full day workshop last month, and I'm going to do a second one in February. And it's about the creation of self. And for me, in Buddhist practice, there's three elements. There's the creation of a negative, of an unhealthy sense of separate self. There's the creation, the intention, and that's mostly done unintentionally. Okay. the second is that the intentional creation of a healthy sense of self, which is intentional. And there's methods to do that. And then there's the third thing, which is holding all of that, which is what I like to refer to is transpersonal experiences, experiences of awareness and emptiness, which define the first two. All of those are core Buddhist ideas. So I'm not sure, it's somewhere in the middle of February, but if you check the Sacramento Insight website, if you're interested, that'll be a one-day retreat. And, you know, I welcome that you sit in on it. And that whole model that I was talking about, there will be some handouts, and that's what we'll be working with.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're starting to run out of time. So I just want to do two quick things here. Let's see here. Okay. So first, I'd like to dedicate the merit of our effort this evening to John Travis and his healing, and to everybody in the world right now who's suffering and needs our support and encouragement. You know, the amazing things are that there are some people right now that aren't suffering, and at this particular moment don't really need our support or encouragement. And then there's millions that do. So I'd like to dedicate this to those people. And then I'd like to close with this little quotation from Noyosho Kempo, who is a Tibetan teacher. And it's very simple. And I found this recently and just really like it. So he says, I'd like to pass on one little bit of advice I give to everybody. Relax. Just relax. Be nice to each other. As you go through your life, simply be kind to other people. Try to help other people rather than hurt them. Try to get along with others rather than to fall out with them. With that, I will leave you, and I will leave you with all of my best wishes. So, thanks very much for sitting in tonight.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to offer a few announcements.